glad to welcome today to the School of Tyrannus Dr. Jimmy DeYoung from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and many places around the world. He is the director of the Shofar Communications, and we're delighted to have you with us today. I wonder if you could tell our viewers about yourself and your ministries and what you do.
Well, we've lived in Israel since 1991, arriving in Jerusalem to take up residency 3 days before the Scuds started coming in the first Gulf crisis. We were able to, with some Israelis, establish a local church, a Baptist church in the city of Jerusalem, Kehillah Yerushalayim, the assembly at Jerusalem. And over these years, we've seen from 6 people who were the original ones in the church, it built to over 350 people now meeting there at the assembly every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. One of the men that was involved in the beginnings of our church also worked as my translator, McCall, for many of those years, and I had the privilege and honor of mentoring him. And just a couple of years ago now, we moved him into the position of lead pastor, and we took me and made me the old gray head as far as the church is concerned.
Yes, the pastor emeritus.
I guess that's the title they give you. Anyway, McCall is doing an excellent job. He's Israeli born. He serves in the Israeli Defense Force. He is just a precious man of God. He has a desire to win his people to Jesus Christ. And we've seen over...
Is he a native Israeli?
He is.
Sabra?
He is a Sabra, born and raised in Jerusalem. And his dad, coming out of the Holocaust from Poland, his dad is, I would imagine, he's about 4'11". He never finished the 4th grade in school. He speaks 11 languages fluently, and he is the most powerful Jewish witness I've ever seen. His name is Tzvi Kalashir. Has a little article in the Israel My Glory magazine every month. But his son, Menno, is just, the apple doesn't drop very far from the tree, they say. And Menno is doing an excellent job, and we're seeing Jewish people come to know Christ. Over 160 Jews have come to know Christ, been baptized. The problem we have at our Baptist church is we have no baptistry. So we just use the Jordan River.
Well,
it was
that's
good
a
enough
good
for
second,
Jesus.
yeah.
It was good enough for us. But we have been involved in trying to win Jewish people to Christ. But it's not only Jewish people. We've had the opportunity to reach out to those in Bethlehem, since our church is right at the edge of the Shepherd's Fields there in the city of Jerusalem. And when we have had opportunity to preach about Christmas, we simply say, well, right there is, or when we're talking about the second coming, we point towards the Temple Mount about 3 miles from our church.
You have automatic visual instructions.
We certainly do, and it's been a thrill to watch the people come to know Christ and start to grow in the Lord. I've had the ministry since 1992 of being the co-teacher on the Day of Discovery television program with Marty Hahn. This is the television ministry of Radio Bible Class, who puts out the little book, Our Daily Bread. And so we've had that unique ministry. We're on the PAX network every week. We're on about 300 other selected television stations. And then I have a radio ministry. When I arrived in Israel 3 days before the Scud, some of the Christian networks started calling me, and they wanted me to report. I was a journalist. I was in the country as a journalist, really going in to do missionary work, but I had to have a visa, so I went under a work visa as a journalist. And it's not that I was the greatest Christian journalist there, as I was the only one. So they called me and had opened up opportunities on the Moody Broadcasting Network on a weekly basis. We established our own hour-and-a-half call-in talk program heard across the nation. I have a little 5-minute daily broadcast, which we also post on our website for those who may not be able to pick us up in their area.
Let's give your website address.
That website address is www.prophecytoday.com. PROPHECYTODAY, prophecytoday.com. And we post the latest news. I do a little 5-minute commentary. I pick the leading news story and give a prophetic perspective on that. And so God has kept us busy, not only doing the radio, the television, the building of the church, but now doing a lot more conference work across the United States and Europe, South America, and around the world, wherever the door is opened up for us.
So you're the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. I guess that's the mother church then.
That is, and I'm here to check on you, Brother Tom. to see if you're doing what we want you to be doing. I'll report back to the mother church.
Glad to know that. Yeah. Well, we're very interested in all of your ministries and everything. We understand that you have done a lot of research on things like the temple, the prospects of the rebuilding of the temple, which is also a favorite subject of mine too.
And I'm sure it is. And for those who are looking for some kind of an indicator coming out of the Middle East as to how close we may well be to the second coming of Christ, I think the number one indicator would be the Aliyah, or the return of the Jews to the land. And number two would be the arrangements for the temple, preparations to build this next temple.
What kind of preparations are there?
Well, first of all, they have established that indeed they have to have a priesthood. I talked with a rabbi named Nachman Kahana. He is the leading rabbi in the area preparing these men to do the priestly duties. He has a database on his computer in his yeshiva, place of learning for Jewish young men in the Arab quarter of the old city of Jerusalem, and he has 28,000 men listed there who he believes are qualified to be the priest. They have the garments that are all prepared. They have the implements all made. He has joined forces. In fact, Rabbi Israel Ariel, who heads up the Temple Institute, is a student of Nachman Kahana.
Do they have the genealogy?
Well, they don't have that, and I've asked them how they deal with that particular problem. He said, well, it's passed down from generation to generation to generation. He said nobody would be foolish enough to claim to be a priest with all the qualifications you have to meet, with all the requirements of living a priesthood. I didn't take him up because I'm endeavoring to try to really communicate the true Messiah to him, but I laid the question out there, let it linger in his heart a bit. But they've made these preparations. Chaim Richmond, who is the expert on the red heifer, he's involved with this. They're all students of Nachman Kahana. We've watched them as they prepared all these implements. They have them in the city of Jerusalem most recently. They have the menorah, the 7-branch candelabra. They were able to get a gift of 100 pounds of pure gold, and they formed and made then the menorah on display in the Cardo of the old city. Most recently, Israel Ariel was involved in a group up in Tiberias. Tiberias was the location where the Sanhedrin at the time of Christ and the time of Herod's temple, after the destruction of that temple in 70 AD, they traveled around Israel, ending up in Tiberias, and there the Sanhedrin dissolved. But now they have reinstituted the Sanhedrin there in Tiberias, and these who are involved in preparing to build the temple, many of them are part of that number of 70 wise scholars from Israel. They say they are ready to elect the high priest, and in order for the high priest to have a place to work, they must, of course, rebuild the temple. So all of those preparations have been made. Everything is set in place. Just one little slight problem.
Yes.
There's a gold dome building on the spot where they want to build that new temple, so they have to take care of that.
How much of an obstacle is that?
Just a bit. And they say, I asked them about it, they say, well, you know, God has some responsibility in this too, and he'll take care of that gold dome building when he's ready for us to erect the temple. That'll be moved out of the way. I can tell you, during the Gulf crisis, while we were living there in 91, when the siren would sound indicating there was an incoming scud, all of us would put on our gas masks, go to our sealed room to be protected from a possible gas attack. But the Jews living in the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem didn't put on a gas mask, didn't go into their sealed room. They ran to the western wall and they started to pray. Dear Lord, please let one of those scuds hit the dome of the rock. Of course, you know what scud stood for. SCUD, sure could use direction. Saddam Hussein,
Very sophisticated.
he didn't know where they were going, and they were praying that one of them would hit it. So, but that didn't happen. But I believe there is a scenario in God's Word. I think early on in the tribulation period, when the nations that are gathered around Jerusalem that hate the Jewish people start to attack, possibly then a scud or some type of military armament will destroy that dome of the rock. And I think that there's an indication in the book of Daniel chapter 11 that the Antichrist then says, since he had the opportunity previous to this to confirm a peace agreement with them, he will say, okay, now I'm here to protect you. I've removed the dome of the rock. Go ahead and build your temple up there. I think it'll be built pretty quickly.
What does the Ark of the Covenant have to do with the restoration?
Well, the Ark of the Covenant is essential for this next temple. I believe Messiah's temple, described in Ezekiel 40 to 46, 202 detailed verses about Messiah's temple, the temple during the millennial kingdom, there's no Ark of the Covenant required. It was a model of him to come. And of course, when you have the real thing, Jesus Christ, you no longer need the model. But I believe this next temple, which will be the temple standing during the tribulation period, must have all these implements, must have the Ark of the Covenant. And I have a documentary that I prepared, Ready to Rebuild, where I interview two outstanding leading rabbis. One of them was the rabbi at the Western Wall on the day that after 2,000 years the Jews broke through the Lion's Gate, went up on the Temple Mount, reunified the city. And the rabbi,
a great day, yes.
It was an unbelievable day. And that rabbi, who was the chief rabbi then, that rabbi and another rabbi, Yehuda Levi, who was the chief rabbi of the Western Wall and all the holy sites, these two men went into and underneath the Temple Mount, and they claimed to have seen the Ark of the Covenant. Now, they gave a proof text. 2 Chronicles 35:3 says, Josiah, according to the fact that Solomon had prepared a place to hide, a secret secluded hiding place, to hide the Ark of the Covenant in case of a problem, they claimed that that text means that the Ark was put under there. So they then went in, and they both told me, and in fact CBS Television hired me to do a television shoot with one of them, and they both claimed they saw the Ark of the Covenant. They were within 25 feet of bringing it out. So I believe it's under there. I think that's the location where it's always been. I don't think it was in the Holy of Holies during the Second Temple period, but they say they know where the Ark of the Covenant is. I asked both of the rabbis, I said, why didn't you bring it out when you were under there? They said, we don't have a place to put it yet. As soon as we erect a place to put it, we'll bring it out. So I think it's there ready to go.
So they say it's in storage.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fascinating. Well, what other developments, like the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians, what's going to happen there? What is happening from a Christian perspective? What can we expect?
You know, I've just recently concluded a study on the book of Malachi. In chapter 1 of Malachi, he talks about the descendants of Esau, the Edomites, who would return and rebuild. And he said, when they rebuild, I will call their borders the borders of wickedness, and I will have indignation against them forever. Now, if you go back to the book of Genesis, chapter 25, the Lord told Rebekah, when she carried two sons within her womb, Jacob and Esau, he said, there are two boys in there, but there are two nations in there. We know that Jacob became Israel. And I believe that Esau, his descendants, are what we know as the Palestinian people today. And there's some very distinguished rabbis in Israel making the exact same statement with documentation to prove it. And so if that thus be the case, and I believe there's good textual proof to validify that statement, we do know there's more judgment pronounced upon the Edomites than any people in all of the world. We do know that there will be a people, Ezekiel chapter 35, that will rise up to kill the Jews in the last days and try to take their land. I've got this thought in my mind, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, looks like a duck, it must be a duck, you know? So indeed, I think the scriptural textual proof is that these people, the Israelis and the Palestinians, will be fighting in the last days. And I think that's exactly what we see today. There was a peace treaty signed September the 13th, 1993, referred to as the Oslo Accords. It never worked. It has not worked. It has never been normalized. There is continual efforts to try to bring peace. Even our own president, George W. Bush, and the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair, believe that that is the number one problem in the world today, the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You look at the terrorists, they say that's the number one problem. Osama bin Laden says, what I'm doing is because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Saddam Hussein said, that's why I did what I did. I put together a Jerusalem army. I was going to liberate Jerusalem.
And so the struggle is not so much between Isaac and Ishmael as between Jacob and Esau.
Exactly right. The two nations that the Lord told their mother would come out of her womb. And they're there fighting. The book of Obadiah talks about at the time of the end, when Jesus Christ returns, he will use the descendants of Jacob, the Jewish people, as the fire, the flame, and he will use the descendants of Esau as the stubble that will burn up. And I think that's what we see being prepared. The stage is being set for that prophecy to be
Well,
fulfilled.
we could go on for hour after hour discussing these wonderful truths, and we appreciate so much Dr. Jimmy DeYoung being with us at the School of Tyrannus today. The Lord bless you in
Thank
your
you, sir.
ministry.
Thank you.
Thank you.